My guest today is writer, director, and actor Ali Cook and his newest short film, The Pearl Comb. Now, The Pearl Comb tells a thought provoking and captivating story, blending historical drama with the elements of myth and mystery. Its narrative highlights the resilience of women in a time when their voices are often silenced, drawing inspiration from the true story of the Edinburgh Seven. Now, it was nominated for 5 awards at the British Short Film Awards, winning 2, and will screen at the upcoming Oscar qualifying Cleveland International Film Festival. Now, The Pearl Comb follows Ali's BAFTA longlisted short, The Cunning Man, which screened at 88 international film festivals and winning 33 awards. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome filmmaker Ali Cook and his captivating and stunning short film, The Pearl Comb, to the show. Welcome, Ali.
Hey, how you doing? Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. And I have to say, this is probably one of the most original shorts I have seen in the last 3 years. So, where did you get the idea for the Pearl Comb?
Well, I am a weird guy and I'm into weird things. So I have a very unusual route to show business in that I am originally a magician and I performed a lot of TV shows here in the UK as a magician. So I did 7 TV series. And my old producer, who's a famous comedy producer here in Britain, he told me I should go into acting, and that's how it started. But my short films, they all revolve around magic because my hobby is the history of magic. So that's where I come up with these weird tales no one's heard of, basically.
Well, it adds to a sense of mystique, mystery, and intrigue, which the Pearl Comb has all of those three elements in it. And I noticed that, and one of the things I have to say, because one thing I love period piece films. Features are shorts. I love when it's a period piece because I think that the creativity is higher, but I also know that it can be a lot more expensive when it comes to filmmaking. But even though it is a period piece, it highlights women in roles of control, not submission, but not to give anything away, but also feeling trapped. So,
Yeah.
why did you want to showcase female empowerment?
Well, I'm going to be totally honest. I didn't at the start. I I sort of had a creepy, you might call it a folk horror lined up, and I had most of the horror story kind of in place because I'd been on holiday to Cornwall, which is where it's set, and I'd heard about legends about mermaids and all the traditional mermaid folk tales. And the original idea was to do a story about a mermaid, but not a Disney mermaid, but rather going back to the traditional folk stories. And mermaids were absolutely terrifying. I mean, they were brutal killers. So I found that quite exciting originally. And then as I was writing it, I couldn't come up with a good ending. And then my partner, she said, you know, women weren't allowed to be doctors in those days. And I was like, and I was, using my mindset from now, I went off and did a load of research, and that's where I heard about the Edinburgh Seven, which were the first 7 women to qualify as doctors in the UK. And the public went mad. They threw mud at them. The medical profession were like, a woman's place is in the home, not in the workplace. And then it was from there that I suddenly had this new layer to the whole short film that I then applied. And I was always entertained by, I loved the TV series in America, Mad Men, where we would see what people were thinking in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and how it shocked us. I always remember there was a scene where there was 2 pregnant women smoking, having martinis. And I'm like, yeah, I'm 4 months pregnant now. Everything's fine. And we're all going, and I wanted to use a little bit of that, of just, the character that I played, who's the doctor investigating this woman's claims. Of course, he's dismissive of women because people were dismissive of women. It was just the mindset of that time. So it was the 1890s. And I think that in of itself is fascinating for us to watch.
Well, here's what's interesting because you bring this up in modern day time now, and you're probably going to get this when your film is shown at multiple film festivals. You're going to have audience members in the Q&A go, "Well, the doctor was a male chauvinist." But the
Yeah,
problem is that they're viewing it from the modern day, not looking back in the 1800s and realizing that's just the way the thought process and the mindset was back in the day. Nobody thought of what a male chauvinist would have been. A woman's place was in the home. She's in the
yeah,
kitchen. She cleans house. She does nothing more. But like he
yeah.
alluded to, a woman in the medical field, well,
No
she's
chance.
going to be classified as a witch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there's a line in it which he says, "Do you think the public are more frightened of an educated woman than of a witch?" And then she says, "Yes," and that is the truth. And actually, in those days, a lot of women who were healers, they either pretended to be witches or midwives, but they wouldn't admit to their actual training. Uh, One of the things that I find amusing, though, although it's a very dark short, is the doctor. He's still a gentleman, but he's completely offensive. So it's just amazing how he sort of respects a woman like a gentleman, but is completely dismissive. Or, I mean, I didn't go down the comedy route, but
Well, it's true. It's true because
yeah,
he had this. Well, he had a very professional demeanor. He
yeah,
was kind. Um,
yeah.
he never said anything negative
No,
towards her. Everything was posed as a question, like you had
yeah.
said. Well, what are they going to be more scared of, an educated woman or a
Or
witch?
yeah,
So he
and
made
then
her
and the
answer.
yeah, and the answer, of course, is an educated woman. They were terrified, but a witch, phew, not a problem. Uh, I also that's one of the other things that I find so entertaining with the sketches that you would see on Saturday Night Live. You know, one of their great techniques is I studied at the Second City sketch writing years ago, and they said that they used to have the caveman sketch where they would apply the mindset of a caveman and put him in today's world. And in a way, there's a little bit of that going on in this short. It's not obviously the full story, but it was the layer that completed the story for me.
Yeah, there are so many incredible elements to this film. First of all, it's so original because so many shorts today are like real life characterizations and
Yeah,
stories, and you're going through the emotional roller coaster with a lot of these shorts. Yours is so different, which is why I love it so much. And then, and I know that this film will probably end up in some of the horror related film
mm.
festivals, but see, I don't look at this film as horror. I look at it
No,
more as mystery.
yeah,
And but what I love is, and this is why I was kind of happy when The Substance made it to the Oscars, because what we need in filmmaking is to take that type of genre but make it
yeah,
cinematic. And you
I
took the
agree.
story and you made it cinematic. It's almost like um it's almost where, because it's a period piece, it's almost like taking Pride and Prejudice and adding a horror element to it. And
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
Well,
so that's what makes it intriguing, and the fact that you truly brought back what a mermaid really is. She was a siren,
yeah,
and
she was
and
silent,
you
yeah,
showed that scene with Luty
yeah,
because he alone was a fascinating study. He was
yeah.
not a selfish man. He was
No,
faithful. He was
yeah,
wise and not easily fooled,
yeah,
because it showed he had an inner strength when he first came across the
yeah,
mermaid. And that's when you show that a mermaid is not this Disney like character.
yeah. Because I used to perform a lot of stand-up comedy. Um, Another route in comedy is always undercutting common assumptions. You know, it's how you get to great jokes. And I was actually I used to write with a guy from your neck of the woods, actually, out in your part of the world, called Dean Lewis, a stand-up comedian. He used to teach me to write, and one of the things he always used to say is, "Kill the sacred cow," which is a phrase which is, you think of a common assumption and then you try to strip it away. So I did that with the mermaid. We tend to think of mermaids as sort of delicate, romantic creatures, but why not make a sort of a vampiric killer instead? And then, when in this instance, she's used to luring men away, but in this instance, she actually tries to lure away a man who is earnest. So it doesn't work. So now she's stuck and he's stuck. So it then becomes an interesting story you've not seen with a mermaid. And there's a good line in there where she goes, "Can I take you away?" And he's like, "No, I'd rather have wine, my dear." And he's just an old fisherman who just wants to go home, you know.
Well, and being a fisherman, he's already heard all of the tales
Yeah,
of mermaids until he
yeah,
actually sees one, and then he sees, it's almost like looking back and realizing that the tales of a mermaid, that they do lure you into the sea, they take your life. He kind of knew that, and then when she showed her true colors, he's
yeah,
just like, yeah, I'm not going to go this route anymore.
yeah. I
So
know
I'm just
what's
going to
going on.
drop you off into the water. But
Yeah,
she gives him the comb. And
yeah.
but I want to ask, because why was his characterization important in contrast to his wife Betty?
Oh, that is a very good question. Um, I think that I wanted I wanted to do a curse film. So, one of the other elements is they inherit this magical comb from a mermaid that allows them to heal people. The problem is, in return for this comb, every 9 years, a blood relative has to be taken. So it's a classic, monkey paw type film. Uh, but I kind of wanted them to just be a happy couple that came across this magical item rather than a couple that desperately needed it. So that again, I was trying to subvert the genre a little bit. Um, so I enjoy looking at all of these sort of common tropes that you see in stories and then mixing them together and then trying to put a little spin on them.
Well, that scene where Luty is in the shed and his wife Betty finds him there, and she thinks he's passed out drunk.
Yeah,
He was
yeah.
laying there because he was in fear.
Yes, yeah. Now that's actually my favourite scene in the film. And Simon Armstrong, who plays Luty, he's actually him and Willem Dafoe. They're my two favourite actors in the world, and very different. One's a guy from Wales and one's an international movie star. But they're my two favourite actors, and I just think whatever Simon does is incredible. And we did that in about two takes. It was, and his fear in his eyes when she wakes him up is he's absolutely terrified. It was just an astonishing performance.
Well, the thing is too, and it may have to do with the lighting, because when the camera is on him, because he comes to and he has so much fear, you even have his complexion come
Yeah,
across as white, like
yeah,
he's been scared to death and the color has drained from him. And then when the
yeah,
camera shot appears on her, it's the complete opposite. So
yeah.
the contrast blends so well together, but it's telling a deeper story.
Yeah, well, the guy who shot my short is a guy called Dave Miller, and he also shot my first short film, and we just get on really well. But that was actually one of his ideas, and if you see it's very cinematic, the Pearl Comb, but Dave had some great little ideas like that to just really help with the storytelling visually.
Yeah, and that's what I love, because I looked up Dave Miller and realized that he had done your other film, The Cunning Man. So I
Yeah.
figured that since he did a stellar job with The Cunning Man, you're going to have him do this film
Yeah.
as well. But I love films with a true cinematic look. But what makes it even better is that the story is it's a story that people do not expect. So it
Yeah.
makes it that much more beautiful in its look, but it adds to the story because it's being a period piece. Because when I looked at this film overall, it's a very ambitious project for a short
It
film.
is.
You
It
have a
is.
stellar cast, it's a
Yeah.
period piece, and
Yeah.
the visual effects are incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
why didn't you create it as a feature film instead? Because I wanted more after seeing it.
Well, if I had more money, I would. But it was also so the Cunning Man. I wrote and produced that, but my friend directed it. So, and what actually happened on the day, I felt like I was working a lot with the actors, but she was very, very good in post production. But I said to myself, for my next short, I want to do everything. I enjoy kind of doing everything. And so that's why I directed it. And I deliberately did an ambitious short because I wanted to see if I could handle the pressure of a full on feature. So that was part of the game. I wanted to see if I could really do it. So it was a crew of 80. We had a lot of VFX, and the VFX was very technical. There were quite a lot of shots where no one knew what to do, and between between us and the VFX guys and the VFX supervisor, we all figured it out. There's lots of things of mermaids swimming away. So does she wear a green tail, a black tail, a green, blue screen tail? The boat scene, how are we going to shoot that? And so it was very, very ambitious. And I think part of the reason I ended up doing it is because I didn't know how hard it was. I actually didn't really know. So I just kind of was like, yeah, let's go for it. So,
Well,
if I
you
don't
know,
get
it's funny because her tail is on the silvery gray side, which really played well with the backdrop of the coastline. Because
yeah,
if it was blue, if it was
yeah,
green, or a mixture of the color, to me it would stick out too much because her complexion was pale.
that's right.
So,
Yeah,
and so it goes along with the colorization of the film. So
yeah,
I would have never made her like vibrant at all. I think it works because this is a mystery. This is giving us a little bit of horror at the same time. So it just plays because she comes across as cold.
that's right. And I mean, the reality is Clara, who played her, um, she's a professional model as well, so she doesn't have an ounce of body fat, and she's stood in the ocean in Cornwall in November. She was cold. And but luckily that really added to the character. So, but again, I wanted to. I really enjoy trying to do something how it was actually written or believed originally. That's what I enjoy doing. So I find it fascinating that I really wanted this mermaid to be believable. So when you see she's a bit bedraggled. She looks cold and she looks hungry and she's pale. It doesn't look like she's eaten for a while. Well, no wonder she wants to try and bite someone. So that was the idea that she was more like a vampire and she was desperately trying to feed, basically.
And that's exactly what she was. Now, I was impressed because you have an incredible cast.
Yeah.
How did you come to cast your film with such stellar actors?
Well, a little bit of luck. I have to say, the genius move of the whole short film is I decided to make it during the writer's strike, so no one was working. I didn't plan this, but no one had really worked. Even though we're in Britain, the writer's strike had affected the industry in Britain, of course. So I managed to get very good people because no one had really been working for a long time. So that was one of the reasons. And also, I think I I say this to everyone about making a short film. The minute you commit, you somehow get a bit lucky somehow. Like to get hold of BT Edney, and she was so happy to do it. She just had an operation. She was feeling down in the dumps. She just had an operation on her ankle, and she felt really sort of down. And it really brightened her day. And then Simon was excited. The hardest person to cast was actually the mermaid. That was the one where because I knew Simon already. BT was a direct offer, but trying to find someone to play that mermaid was tough. And that's where we went out with a very young casting director, and she's normally a casting associate, and so she was excited to do it. You got to cast a mermaid, and that was the hard person to find. And we had some great tapes, but it was just trying to find that person with that alluring but dangerous edge. It was very tricky.
Yeah, and the fact that you chose a blonde to be the
Yeah,
mermaid, because
yeah,
most of the mermaids that we see in film are not blonde. It's either
no,
going to be a redhead or a brunette or black hair. I love the
yeah,
fact that she was blonde because her presence is felt, and it's more of an emotional presence that is felt. That way,
yeah.
her look is not taking away from the scene.
That's
But
right. Yes.
I loved Beatty. She reminded me of her demeanor in this film comes across as Kathy Bates like.
Yeah, it does actually. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that. I mean, when I was casting, it was between her and one other great actor, and it was quite hard trying to decide between the two. But she just had that. She just had an alluring edge, but you simultaneously know, oh my god, I don't know what she's, I don't know what she's really thinking. Which, of course, is the classic siren. There really is an inherent danger going on there, and that's what really worked.
Yeah, I don't want to give the ending away because I want everybody to be
Yeah.
as surprised as I was. But when the doctor was at her house and they had
Hmm.
that little conversation in the kitchen, and then he gets up,
Mm.
and why he got up and walks into that other room, and that
Hmm.
the way the camera shot is in that other room,
Yeah.
you're sitting there thinking, what has this woman been doing? Because it's hidden from public view, but technically not really hidden from public view because
Yeah.
he was there to verify what she was doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, without giving too much of the plot away, he was, yeah, of what she was really doing. And the hard thing was, there was probably enough plot to make it into a feature, and I had to get it into 20 minutes. And that took a lot of just rewriting and rewriting, really. And when we came to the edit, I managed to chop out 4 minutes to try. I wanted to get it to 15, but that would have been too much. It would have been too much.
No,
Um,
I would leave it like it is
yeah,
because
yeah,
this film does not drag, it doesn't lag. You're captivated by every scene because especially when Luti is out fishing and he's on the, I guess you call it, on the cliff,
mm,
and he looks over.
yeah,
The greatest thing about that scene is the audience has no clue as to when he looked over and the look on his face, and then he comes back and he's like,
yeah,
"Did I see what I just saw?" Because
yeah.
it's almost like finding a treasure, but then you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy. And I was trying to again. I feel like when we see a lot of fantasy shows, we completely forget about the reality of those people in those worlds. It's so easy to go, oh yeah, and then the lead actor looks over and sees a mermaid. Yeah, well, it's a fantasy film, that's what happens. But it's like, no, no, wait a minute. Someone has just seen a mermaid. They would be terrified but simultaneously a bit intrigued. And I was trying to think of it a little bit like, when you see those alien videos on YouTube, they're releasing all this footage now of these fighter pilots, and you're like, oh my god, this is kind of terrifying, but at the same time, you've just got to watch, and it's that kind of feeling that I was trying to capture.
Yeah, and it was perfect because because if people realize the time period is the 1800s, you
Mm,
have to go back and remember that there were so much folklore
yeah,
back in the day that people back in that day believed.
absolutely, yeah.
Nowadays we're just like, yeah, that was some big old tall tale. If you got you can only prove it to me if you got a video. But now I'm like, yeah, do you realize how many videos are faked? So that doesn't. So I'm half this
yeah,
time I just look at all this junk as crap. But
yeah,
but back in the day in the 1800s, people believed, because
yes,
you would hear merchant ships and the
yeah,
captains and the crew tell all of these tales of what they have seen,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so the look on Ludi's face was just perfect.
yeah.
And
I
but I,
mean, again, he was a brilliant performance there. I thought, um, because in reality, the blokes who set up all the cameras were actually behind the cliff when he was peering over, and they're all there having their sandwich and setting up all the rigging and all this. And he's like, his performance was incredible, you know. But again, that was one of the beauties of a period drama is it's a great way to get people to forget the mindset of the 21st century, and I think to invite them into a more superstitious world, really. And then the other thing, of course, it's set in the countryside. So people living in the sticks in Cornwall in the 1800s, boy, they really would be believing in folk tales.
yeah, because they're not going to be able to tell a whole lot of people what they saw, or they just keep it to themselves, thinking that if
Yeah,
I tell somebody, they're going to think I'm crazy. But there was an
yeah,
element that I love that you added, because when it comes to mermaids and those that don't really understand the true story of mermaids, that you had her sing in the same way that back in the day, that's what mermaids, if they were real, would do. They had that very particular mysterious soundings type song that
yeah.
was used as a calling in a way to draw whoever was around towards them.
Yeah, it's an amazing track that I found it was actually a German dance music producer, I believe, had made this track about the mermaid's lure. But it was I had that track, and then I also got a singer in to kind of riff around it. But there's something about it that it sounds a little bit like church chanting, kind of mixed with folk singing, and it kind of sounds a bit sexy and a bit sad all at the same time. And the effect, I think, on men is it feels like there's a woman in peril and I need to save her. I think that's the effect it has.
It
um,
does. That's
yeah,
exactly what it was.
yeah, and it's amazing that it's not so much, oh, there's a sexy woman around the corner. It's more the need to save the woman, I think, is the lure, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
almost more like in Pretty Woman when, I love Pretty Woman, the film, and I think it's an amazingly good film. But his need to protect her and to save her, that's a huge thing for guys, I think.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it worked. That whole scene was just brilliance in the way everything came together. Now, without giving too much away, how did you handle the water scenes?
Oh my God! Now that's where we had talks after talks. There was chat of us going to Pinewood Studios where they shot the water scenes for James Bond, and it would be like more than our entire budget for the day. But then at the same time, we didn't know how to do it. And then they were sort of being quite nice to us because they hadn't been working, but we still couldn't really afford them. And what happened in the end, and this is where I feel like luck comes in, is that in Penzance there was an outdoor Lido, which is where they'd just cornered off a part of the sea and they turned it into a public swimming pool. So we had basically the advantages of a swimming pool by the sea that we could film in, and the water didn't look like swimming pool water; it looked like the seawater because it was the seawater. And what we managed to do is we filmed quite a lot of her scenes in there, and then we composite it in to the ocean or into the rock pool. And really, because it was outdoor and the water matched, that's how we managed to do it.
Wow, because
Yeah,
the visual effects are so good in this film that no one is going to be able to watch the film and go, well, that was bad CGI.
yeah.
No, it's literally perfect and seamless. I mean, I was impressed.
Oh, well, I always this comes from being a magician. So in magic, we have a few rules. One of them is don't run when no one's chasing you, which means say you're doing a magic trick, you don't have to show that your hands are empty every 2 seconds if the audience already doesn't suspect it. So there's a feeling that you can underdo the CGI if you can, and you're always better using implication rather than overtly showing it. And what we do, we have the big shot at the start where we see the mermaid, which is Luti's point of view, and we see her in all of her glory. And then from there on in, we're only seeing glimmers of the tail or the top of the tail or the middle of the tail, but only for a few seconds. And that mixed with the color scheme, with the grade, that was another way to make the CGI look less computery and more real, basically.
Well, so, what was the most challenging scene to film?
Oof. Now, uh,
Don't give away the ending.
I know that scene wasn't too bad. That wasn't too bad, actually. The challenging one by far was the scene on the boat. Now, that
At
would
night, at night.
at night, yeah. Now you would think that would be one of the easier scenes, but we had one spotlight that represented the moon. So every time we had to move the camera, some poor guy had to get up the ladder and move this spotlight all around the studio. And that just took ages. And because that took ages, when we actually got to shooting, we really had to like power through, and we only just got everything we needed in a day for that. I mean, it took a day to shoot that, and it's what, I don't know, 20 seconds in the film, 30 seconds. So
Yeah, at
yeah,
least. At
yeah,
least.
yeah. So that was actually the technically the hardest scene, I would say.
Now, I'm not going to give away the ending. All I'm going to say is this. You did incorporate an element of magic, and that's
Yeah,
all I'll say.
yeah,
And
definitely. Yeah,
it took me a while to figure that out. But
yeah,
when you at the beginning of the interview you had mentioned that you had been a magician,
mm,
then it dawned on me how that worked in the ending scene.
yeah, yeah,
Which it's brilliant. It's a surprise. It's shocking. It's scary.
yeah.
So, who was responsible for the special effects makeup from the wounds on Betty's arm
Mm.
to the other characters in the film, as well as the mermaid? Because everything was authentic.
Yeah, so there was a makeup artist called Scarlett O'Connell, and she's absolutely fantastic. And so she did, for example, Betty has very bad eczema. Now, Scarlett herself had suffered from eczema. So when she came to do the eczema, it looked so good because she'd been battling that herself when she was younger. And also, I'd actually, as an actor, I'd been in a couple of films Scarlett's done. I just know that she's just really great. And we also spent a long time. We tried different things with the mermaid. I tried sort of little fins coming out here and all sorts of different things, but they all looked a little bit too much and a bit fake. And I just came down to that less is more. And also as long as you just imply them well, so it's quite easy to get good fake teeth. And so there's one scene where you see her sort of fangs, and again, I didn't want the fangs to look too crazy. I wanted them to look more real rather than like big crazy fangs.
More
And
piranha like.
Pardon?
They were more piranha like.
Yes, they were. Yeah, absolutely. And they're spiky and sharp, but they're not too big. And then there's another company here in Britain who do a lot of the Doctor Who effects, and they're called Millennium Effects. So they did like the prosthetic stuff, basically, and they were excellent. I mean, the only thing, because it's a short film, oh my god, you don't have much time. So when it comes to that stuff, we were like, come on, let's go, let's go, let's go. And we get like two stabs at it at most, and then we're off, we're on to the next bit. So
Well, how many days did it take you to film the Pearl Comb?
it was nine. It was nine, which is a lot for a short. But for this short, probably not enough. So
No, I don't think you left anything out in this film. So what has been the audience's reaction to the film so far?
It's been great. I mean, we've only just started. We've only been to 3 festivals, and so far we've won 2 awards, and we're nominated for a third award. And we're about to go to Cleveland and also Fantosapa in Brazil. Actually, that's happening as well. So, and then there's another one this weekend in Britain. With a smaller one. So the reaction's been great so far. I think I have crazy ideas, but because they are so novel, I think they can be a bit of a refreshing break at short film festivals. I think people enjoy the difference, basically, of the stuff I come up with.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that 100%. This is the break. This is the breath of fresh air in the midst of film blocks at film festivals because no one expects this story,
No.
but it's done. I mean, literally when I watch this film, it's like watching a miniature feature film. And I love short films that have that element, have that look. And
Yeah.
but this is the type of film that really begs for more. So is there any idea or talk of the possibility of creating the Pearl Comb as a full-blown feature?
Well, I mean, at the moment, I have another 2 features that I'm working on. Again, in the folk horror area, but again, I always like them to have a social story, so it's not just a folk horror. Like that's just something I like. When I saw, for example, the film Hereditary, which was as much a family drama as it was a horror film, I just quite like those elements. So I am working on 2 other features. I haven't thought about the Pearl Comb as a feature film, but you know, if it carries on the way it's going, maybe we might have to do that. That might be the way in, I think.
Well, unless some big studio comes to you says, "Hey, we want to take this concept and we need you to make a bigger picture."
Oh, I would love to do that. Yeah. Revenge of the Mermaid Killers, I think, would be the title.
Well, yeah, because it's like looking back and thinking about films like Sleepy Hollow,
Yeah, yeah,
and the studios don't produce enough films in that genre. because I
Yeah.
think the audience loves period films because it takes us back to another time. It takes us, like you had said earlier, it takes us out of the modern day,
It, it, it's a it's a great
rigmarole.
it's a great invitation. It's a great invitation to suspend your disbelief. And then I also think period drama is a great place where everyone can show off. So the DOP can show off, the lighting guys can show off, of course, costume they can show off, the production design they can show off. Because everyone can really go for it. Whereas if you're doing a gritty urban drama, you sat in Starbucks, so it's so that's one of its advantages. Of course, the downside is the prep time and the cost. Um, but I yeah, I just love mystery. That's basically what I enjoy. Yeah.
This film, because I know that you won many awards with The Cunning Man, but this film, to me, just makes you a bona fide great filmmaker. And
Wow.
and here's the thing that I loved, because you said this earlier, and I've heard, and I don't hear this a lot from filmmakers, and I need to hear it more from them. But you were one of the few that said, I wanted to challenge myself in so many different areas in one film. And to do that and be successful at it, the next time you do something, there's not going to be a spirit of uncertainty or fear when you go into it. You're like, yeah, I've done this before.
Yeah.
I now know what to do, or at least I'm wiser for it.
Yeah. I feel as though like the feature films that I've been working on, they're easier than this. They're much easier to do. So it was a good test under pressure, And also what's great about um, short films is the limitations of your budget. I think it forces you to be a better filmmaker because you're not just shooting here, there, and everywhere, and then get the editor to figure it out. You have to know exactly what you're doing, and particularly with very complex VFX, because if you carry a mermaid this way, that's £500, but if you carry her this way, that's £5,000. So you've got to really know your shots going in, and I actually think that was a great discipline that myself and Dave, we knew every day, we knew exactly what we wanted and had to make it work.
Well, it worked, and it worked so greatly. And ladies and gentlemen, The Pearl Comb is about a fisherman's wife who captures the attention of the medical profession as the first person to ever cure someone of tuberculosis. But a doctor is sent to investigate her miraculous claim, determined to prove that a woman's place is in the home and not practicing medicine, but he soon discovers the source of her unearthly power. Now, The Pearl Comb is an 1800s period piece, and every element is spectacular. This short film has the look and the feel of a feature film, and it looks like $1,000,000. This film, it draws you in from the moment you watch the first scene, and the audience is moved along with intrigue, mystery, and a few twists to keep you captured and firmly planted in your seat. This is one of those films in which you don't want to miss a thing, so pay attention. This film has synergy from the cinematography, the colorization, the special effects, and the special effects makeup to the wonderful cast of characters, and the acting is top notch. I love everything about this film, and I expect it and to see this film go a very long way in the film festival season. Finally, a short film with the feel of a feature film, but so original, it stands out and will stand out among all the short films that will be at all of these film festivals this year. I can't say enough about this film. With writers and directors like Ali Cook who know how to tell a story, the future of cinema is in great hands. So, Ali, I want to thank you so much for sharing this incredible film with me today.
Cheers. Thanks very much for having me on. It's been really cool. Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. And as for me, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to visit bondoncinema.com. And as for me, you'll either see me at the movies or from the red carpet.